So in our continuing journey through the Constitution, we started Article 2 last week on the executive branch for the presidency. Got through Section 1. So just a reminder that section 1, is basically, it talks about the president, the vice president, and they're elected for 4-year terms. And initially there were no term limits, but now there's a 2-term limits because of the 22nd Amendment. So that is basically what Section 1 is about, and it goes through the Electoral College. So we went through that last time. So Section 2 is about the powers of the president. So recall we did a show about the powers of Congress and how there was like 18 clauses with that. Well, there isn't as much here for the president, but Section 2 is where the powers of the presidency are located, despite what the Supreme Court recently said, which basically, the president can basically do what he wants, has immunity. But here, at least I'll be relying on what the Constitution says, and hopefully that decision gets changed at some point in the future. But so Clause 1 starts out indicating that the president is the commander-in-chief of the military. So this is, of course, one of the biggest powers that the president has. Is the Founding Fathers didn't want any military types to be the commander-in-chief, so they wanted a civilian. So this is one of the powers of the president. And also, the president has the power, if there's some sort of an emergency, to call out the National Guard as well from the various states. So he has that power too, under Clause 1. He can also ask for written reports from his cabinet members and all executive departments. So part of the federal government is, all these different departments of, state and Department of Defense and Department of the Treasury and all those sorts of things, right? Those are the cabinet members. And the president can ask for written reports. Well, he can ask for oral ones too, I guess, but the Constitution talks about written reports from his cabinet members, and then all other, all executive departments. So this is referring basically to all those 8 federal agencies that are out there. He can ask for reports from all of those various departments too. And then the next power is one of I think it's becoming more and more controversial, and this is the pardon power, where the president alone, this is the only person that has the power, can do pardons. Now, a couple things about this. First off, the pardon is only for criminal offenses against the United States. They're federal crimes. The pardon, you can't do anything about state crimes. So this is why, Trump is, he was complaining about the New York case, and he's complaining about the Georgia case. One of the reasons why he's doing that is because these are state crimes, and he, if he wins the presidency, and let's hope he doesn't, but if he does, he's going to, try and pardon himself. I mean, he's already said that numerous times. But he can't pardon himself from state crimes. So this is one reason why he's trying so hard to get those cases dropped. Now he's trying his immunity defense there, but we'll have to see how those turn out. But this is why he's arguing so hard on those. But the pardon power for the president is only for federal offenses. Now, the Constitution doesn't say anything about clemency, but the courts have allowed this. Basically, what clemency is that the president can basically let you out of jail early, or reduce your sentence. So, oftentimes the president won't give someone a total pardon, but they'll say, well, you got a 20-year sentence, you've served 15 years, you can go now. They'll just let the person out early. That's what clemency is like you're just reducing the sentence of somebody. So this power is a lot of criticism of it is, well, the presidents do a lot of political favors for their political buddies, and Trump certainly did this. But some Democrats have too. Clinton did this when he was president. So initially this didn't, through our history hasn't been all that controversial, but it certainly is getting to that point now because, of what Trump is doing, and people that are friends of the president are emboldened to commit all these crimes because he'll just pardon them. And if Trump gets elected again, that's what's going to happen again. He's going to pardon all of his buddies again. So the pardon power is a big power that I don't think a lot of people quite understand, that the president is the only one that can do this. Nobody can stop him. So, so that's clause 1. Clause 2, one of the powers the president has is to make treaties with other countries. Now, in order for them to become legal in the United States, the Senate, 2/3 of the Senate, so it's not a majority, it's actually 2/3 of the Senate needs to ratify the treaties before they become effective. There are prior, back in our history, there were a lot of treaties. Not so much anymore. One of the reasons is because you can't get 2/3 of the Senate oftentimes to ratify treaties. So what presidents have done to get around that basically is do executive agreements where you don't need a Senate approval. Or there are some situations involving trade where you got to get Congress's permission or majority vote. It's not a 2/3 vote. So, but if to do treaties, you need 2/3 of the Senate. So the House doesn't have any power here. It's the Senate. The president also has power to make a bunch of federal appointments, to these various cabinet positions and various other executive agencies and those sorts of things. A bunch of, he appoints the federal judges. That's all part of his appointment power, is what it's typically called. Some of these need to be confirmed by the Senate. So again, the House is not involved here. It's just the Senate. And a majority of the Senate needs to vote to approve many of these federal appointments. I actually think now it's a majority of the appointments that the Senate has to confirm, but there are some that they don't. So, for example, the president's White House staff, they don't need presidential appointment, or they don't need a Senate approval. So the typical ones are, again, federal judges, ambassadors, public ministers, and the cabinet members and those sorts of things. So that is in clause 2 for the powers of the president. And then clause 3 for the presidential powers is the president has the power to fill all vacancies that may happen during Senate recess. Now here again, the House is not mentioned. It says Senate recess. So what is going on here is that if the Senate is in recess and there's some jobs that are open that the president has the power to appoint people to, he can do it during a Senate recess without the Senate approval. These appointments expire at the end of the next session. So sometimes you will hear presidents do this. Now, of course, oftentimes if the Senate thinks the president's going to do this, they don't go into a recess, so that they can't do it. So this is called a recess appointment. That's happened in our history. So, but that's out there as one of the president's powers. Section 3 now is about the duties of the president. So Section 2 is about the powers of the president. Section 3 is about the duties of the president. So they differentiate between the two in the Constitution. So this is an area where the president needs to give Congress a State of the Union address. Now, I'm saying address now because it is basically morphed into, actually going to Congress and giving a speech on live TV. Initially, it wasn't that. And the Constitution just says that the president needs to give Congress information on the State of the Union from time to time. That's all it says there. So initially what happened is the president just wrote something. and it was delivered to Congress, and someone in Congress read it. Now, that was the State of the Union address when the United States first started. Sometimes the presidents would, go down and read it in front of Congress. But now it's, morphed into the big TV spectacle that it is. So this normally happens now. The tradition with the State of the Union address is sometimes in February or March every year, typically. And the president meets with the Speaker of the House because that's where the address occurs. It's in the House chambers. They come up with some date that works on both of their calendars. Again, normally it's in February or March each year. And usually it's at this time where the president you'll notice that they talk a lot about, what they want and what they're going to propose to Congress and that kind of stuff. Typically, one of the things the president does here after this, the speech, at some point is he throws down his federal budget proposal. So that's something else that although that's not in the Constitution, but that's kind of what's been happening lately. Another thing that's in the Constitution, though, is the president has the power to call special sessions of Congress. So that doesn't happen very often because, again, as I mentioned before, Congress is normally in session. And when they're not, typically they know that there's, nothing controversial is going to happen at that point. But the president has the power to call a special session. Just like governor's doing a lot of the states. So, sometimes, Governor Walz called a special session or you heard talking about it because the governors in many states have that power too. So the president does as well. Although, again, typically it doesn't happen. The president has the power to adjourn Congress when Congress itself can't agree when to adjourn. Which, again, this doesn't happen hardly at all. Congress agrees when they're going to adjourn. So, but this is the backup in case they can't. The president also receives ambassadors and other public ministers. So this is like, his head of state hosting foreign, dignitaries, that kind of stuff. That's one of his powers. And then the last one that's listed here is one that Trump gets in trouble for, is shall faithfully execute the laws. So this came up twice, during both of his impeachment hearings. There was an issue, and some people were asking that the Trump be impeached for not faithfully executing the laws, because Trump would simply disobey laws. He would not enforce some laws. He would just ignore laws. And this would be a violation of faithfully executing the laws. So this never got into one of the articles of impeachment against him, but it was brought up initially. So, if Trump gets elected again, I have a feeling he'll do the same things. He'll just ignore laws he doesn't like. And he may be violating that part of the Constitution. So that is Section 3. Section 4 is about impeachment. So the president, the vice president, and then the Constitution says, and all other federal officers, so I'll go back to that in just a minute here, can be impeached and removed from office for, and then it lists these 3 reasons: treason. Second one is bribery. Third one is, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Okay, so a few things here. Earlier on in the under the powers of Congress, it talked about about the impeachment and how it has to start in the House. Remember, need a majority vote in the House to impeach the president or the vice president or any other federal officers. So this can be anybody who works in the federal government, basically, can be impeached. So it starts in the House. assuming that a majority of the House votes to impeach somebody, those articles of impeachment then go to the Senate, and then you have to have a trial in the Senate, despite what Mitch McConnell did, where he basically didn't have any trials. And then you need a 2/3 vote of the Senate to actually convict somebody. So this is how Trump got off the 2 times, was we didn't get 2/3 in the Senate. So he stayed in office. So we've come now to the end of Article 2 on the presidency. So next week, I'll be starting on Article 3, which is on the judicial branch and is one of the smaller ones. So I'll probably do Article 3 and probably get into Article 4 next week as well.